I will just say also that I'm a bit worried about rambling on, but I guess the editing I can leave to you.
You can leave that to me. You can leave that to me.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just take a few breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And as you breathe out, see if you can let go of worrying about where you're going to work and what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And breathe in. And as you breathe out, let go of worrying about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first questions you asked me before we started the recording was, how does one do this on one's own?
Mm.
And the answer to that is part of the larger question that you may be interested in exploring. What the pathwork teaches is really hard for a human being to absorb, and that is that there is a perfection in your life. And the biblical phrase is that passeth all understanding.
Mm-hmm.
We are not used to accepting everything that comes at us as perfect. That's just not how we interpret things. Okay? So I call it a game because it helps to lighten it up. It helps to call something a game. You've got to play anyway. Why not call it a game? Okay? And the game is that your life is perfect for what you need to learn. The trick is you don't know what it is you need to learn. Once you get what you need to learn, where your distortions, where your false beliefs are, my experience matches the lectures. And that is, I get it. I understand. And the philosophy that I feel comfortable with is that we are not only divine, we are warriors. We have come here to resolve some really difficult issues, and we don't care what it costs. We really don't. We don't care about pain or stress or difficulty. We don't care how long it takes. The goal is so important that we are willing to work with a plan that stretches us to the edges of our capacity. But the lectures promise no more than that you will not be given more than you can hold. But what that means is it'll feel like a pretty tough burden sometimes. And I'm going to go a step further in a very light and loving way that sounds awful. I mix the two together. If it is important to your spirit to have your back broken energetically, that's what you'll do. But you're not doing it as a punishment. You're doing it because only in that way could you, for instance, realize how much help there is in the world. And that your defense of standing up and taking care of things was not the only way. And that is the only reason you would be brought to your knees, so that you could see something from that position.
that actually happened to me quite literally about 10 years ago, and my back went, and I was flat on my back for several weeks and have continuing problems since. But the instant it happened, even as I was crawling into the house, was that voice in my head saying, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. And it was a very literal experience of having my back broken in order for me to pay attention to what's going on, what am I doing, where I was directing my efforts. Yeah.
So if we analogize that spiritually, the trials and tribulations that we are given are, number one, because we can handle it. And that's a compliment. It's a backwards compliment, but it's a compliment.
I did come to understand at that time that it really takes a great inner strength to tolerate and deal with these sorts of issues, and more than that, to actually go deeper and understand that there's the process going on there that is worth understanding. Despite all the negativity, I do recognise that this is, that kind of test that strengthens your resolve and focuses your awareness and in the proper directions. And
so you've got a template for this. You've got a template for this in your own experience. Now, if we take that template and we move it on to something else, it may help you understand. Now, for instance, on a technical matter, there are a lot of people on the planet who are nowhere near Pathwork communities or Pathwork helpers. The majority of people are nowhere near somebody who practices this kind of work. It's the way it is. There must be a reason why some people were drawn to a certain locale where this was popular, and other people were not drawn to make that move. For instance, one of my teachers was a senior leader in the Pathwork, and she was 1 year younger than me, and she went and started listening to Ava when she was 17 years old, which means I was 18. And in my mind, I thought, I could have done that. I could have done that. I could be that experienced. I could have gotten there in the beginning. I could have had all that experience. But the reality is my life plan didn't need that. That's why I wasn't there. Hers did. My life plan needed a whole other series of experiences. And I found it eventually. So what I'm saying is there's a reason why you are apparently isolated.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And not just me, but many others around the planet.
Many
also.
Yeah. Okay. And that may mean that you're supposed to do this work by hand instead of getting machinery to do it with. Okay. So other people have these great big diggers and they're digging away, and you say, boy, if I had a digger, I'd really crawl through this stuff. Obviously, you're not supposed to have a digger. So there must be some aspect of having to do it yourself, which will activate parts of you that would not be activated if you were surrounded by a loving spiritual community.
I hadn't really quite brought that together before. I'm aware that at least in a couple of my most significant past lives, I was actually a member of a spiritual community. And I've thought for quite some time that I really miss having that kind of support around me and those sorts of currents around me on a daily basis to constantly remind me of where I am and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Let me take that.
And I very much think that this particular life that I've got now is to move away from that kind of support and develop my own backbone.
Exactly.
In that back analogy. Yeah.
So to me, the contradiction between I had that experience shouldn't translate to why can't I have more of it? But perhaps in an adult sense, it can translate to I must not need it, and I remember having had it. So you're not bereft, you're not being punished, but in this particular lifetime, for this particular task, that wouldn't help, as you have just described. Okay. So on my website, I find spirituality everywhere. And I found a little tiny, one of those little cute books about that big. And it had a section in it called Life as a Card Game. And it was a lovely, light, creative, imaginative way to say, what have you got? What cards have you drawn, and which ones can be exchanged? Some can, some cannot. Okay, your gender cannot be exchanged. It can be adjusted nowadays. It can't be exchanged. Okay, your height once you're an adult. That's it, except for a little loss later in life. That's it. Okay, so if you are a towering person, you create an interaction with other people because of your height. I am a very short person. Okay? People look down at me and go, you sound much bigger on the phone. Okay? I must not have needed the extra oomph of being tall. Okay? So the point of the essay was for you to take an inventory, which is also a lot of pathwork is about taking an inventory. And figure out what have you got and what effect has that had on your attitude towards life and others' perception of you. If you're an aggressive personality, that sets up a chain of events. Okay? If you're a meek and shy personality, that sets up a chain of events. So the game is that you were part of the team that selected the qualities of your life in this manifestation. Now, whether you're a junior or a senior member of your own team, that's a matter of development, and I have no idea who you are on a spirit level. Okay? But I usually feel that by the time people are asking the kinds of questions that you are asking, they're ready to come into an awareness that indicates an ability to hold that awareness. So it speaks for itself that we ask the question. Okay. So, you've drawn a certain hand. You were born in a certain place, to certain kinds of parents. You had a certain kind of personality that was almost guaranteed to produce some clichéic childhood experiences. Where your parents reacted to you and you reacted to your parents. And from that, you grew up affected by this relationship. And the idea is that we brought something here that we want to voluntarily put down, but for the moment, we're attached to it. Okay? It's a false belief.
Attached to what particular beliefs about ourselves or characteristics?
A false belief or a misconception. A central false belief or misconception. And we're attached to it. We can't see why it's false. And even if it is false, we don't want to put it down. So we've come into this lifetime to allow that to manifest. The consequences of a false belief will manifest. And a false belief will manifest pain and difficulty. Now, at this point, we're into unique qualities. Sometimes that manifests pain in others in your life, and it's when we see that pain that we reform ourselves. In other situations, the pain is in us, and when we can't take anymore, we release that belief. But either way, the game is to get you to voluntarily, out of awareness, put it down. But it feels important. It feels like if we put that down, we'll be defenseless. If we put it down, we won't have any protection, we won't have any security, we won't have any love. We need this thing that we're holding on to. Now, my experience is that you've undergone this process with smaller items in your life. Okay? Those were like practice steps. You're getting ready for the big one. Okay. Why do I say that? Because you're on a spiritual path and you feel that there's something missing. Okay. And so I'm guessing that you've gotten ready for this. And for some reason, there's still a lack of awareness. So along comes me in the background with these crazy websites and newsletters and requests and offers, and you take me up on it. Okay. It is possible that from this discussion, you could begin to refocus and see something that you may have missed. Not in this hour. Maybe not in this week, maybe not in this year. But you see, that's the difference between human expectations and spiritual tasks.
It's those tumblers that need to fit one after another, and there can be an awful lot of them.
There can be an awful lot of them. Yes.
And an obstacle or obstacles at each step.
So when they train salespeople, they train them to take something like 767 no's, because the 768th might be a yes. They train people in business to not quit. Change your technique, change your approach, but don't quit. Same thing is true here. You may have gone about it in a way that actually strengthened the defenses around this misconception.
That's what I'm feeling, in a very vague sense, but that's what I'm feeling.
So there's a lot of
and it's involuntary, at least consciously involuntary.
Right. So one of the tricks that I use, one of the techniques that I use, is I give people the list of spiritual laws and say, in my whimsical way, read them and tell me which one makes you want to throw up, which one makes you want to whack me on the head, which one makes you say, "You've got to be kidding." That's the one. But sometimes it's the law that we just can't wrap our head around. And the reality is, we don't want to understand that as a fixed law in the spiritual world. We want that rule to wiggle. So we don't want to believe in it, therefore we won't understand it, because like a little kid, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. Okay? So, spiritually, you've been on many paths. Okay. Where do you get stuck? What aspect of spirituality trips you up?
The understanding that all is well and all will be well, and the universe is benign.
Okay. You have a very large community of people who have the same issue. Okay. You are not alone here. I want you to explain to me how a non-benign universe functions.
I can instantly see how I'm transferring my own beliefs onto the universe, and I realise that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
A non-benign universe will throw up obstacles to your happiness and satisfaction. It will try to trick you into following wrong pathways. It will try to stifle your creativity and
Mm-hmm.
your innate openness.
Okay. Why are those signs of a non-benign universe? I can see them as signs of a non-benign person.
Mm, mm.
But why is that proof of a non-benign universe?
Because within myself, I know that I try to be a good person. I know that my family, all in my family, try to be good people, and we try to be non-materialistic. We try to see goodness in everyone. We try to do the right thing, make moral choices.
Okay.
And we've all worked so very hard, and yet we've all had such great difficulties.
I'm going to pause you there.
Mm.
By claiming you know what good is, you unconsciously create bad.
Mm.
When you say, I try to be good, who decided what good was?
Yeah, this is that old societal, religious kind of imperative that's existed for, at least a couple of thousand years, if not longer.
So what if, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to provoke a certain thinking on your part. What if doing what's good according to societal norms is no longer going to advance civilization? What if what civilization needs now is individual, creative, imaginative interpretation? And you're still trying to be good.
It's that inner moral compass, I suppose. A lot of us are aware that society is changing enormously in ways that we can't hope to control on our own individual levels. It's a global movement. Mm-hmm. And I guess a lot of us feel that we have this internal moral compass, whether it's got these religious cultural overlays or whether it comes even from within ourselves, and we figure that that's the only thing that's going to carry us through these periods of great change.
Do you notice how you've suddenly started talking about we and us?
Mm-hmm.
I would suspect that there's a hiding behind numbers going on here. I don't hear your voice.
In a way, to me, it doesn't matter whether I'm talking about myself or talking about larger numbers. I'm aware of these movements because I can feel them within myself.
But what I'm saying is this kind of spiritual path is not about us now. It's about us 10,000 years from now.
Mm.
And to get to us 10,000 years from now, we may have to strike out on our own.
Mm.
And realign these moral compasses that haven't been realigned for a long time.
Mm.
Because most people are afraid to do so. They're afraid they'll be wrong.
Yeah.
Okay? So I want you to imagine for a moment, let's take this analogy. Let's say you've got a compass and you've been using it for thousands and thousands of years. And it's out of alignment. How do you find out it's out of alignment?
In my own case, I would say because of that sense that I've developed as I've grown, that for all my trying to be good, I'm still not having a good life. I'm not getting any kind of rewards for that goodness. I'm still feeling that there's a great misalignment in my life, that I'm not following the paths that I should be on, or it's that follow your bliss thing. I try to follow my bliss, and yet life just throws up obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, and it just seems an impossible thing.
But what I'm hearing is I'm hearing the conflict as I want to be with them. And I'm uncertain of my own direction.
Mm. Mm.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to use this word very carefully. There's a slight spiritual immaturity about that.
Oh, yeah. I feel very much a spiritual child.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
So, what happens when a child needs to find its own compass? When it's a teenager, for instance. That's when human beings begin the process of finding their own moral compass.
Mm.
What do they do first?
Well, they experiment a lot and try lots of different pathways, and often rebel against their parents.
The first thing they do is conform.
Yes, perhaps earlier, and then
Okay.
yeah.
And when that doesn't work,
Mm.
okay, then they will rebel.
Mm.
And because rebellion is so painful and so lonely, they create new families, new pods, new groups of people that are doing what they're doing. And they bond with other teenagers, rock groups, fads, as a process of trying to wean them from the child who just wants to be accepted. So if you can't be accepted at home by your family in this particular area, whatever area this is, then you go outside the family and you find a new family where you can be accepted in your process. You're not done yet, but you don't know that. And then from our teens to our 20s to our 30s to our 40s, we change over these groups. Some of us do. Others stay with the families the rest of their life, and it's a happy clan. Now, since that's not our story, there's no point in talking about it.
Yeah.
It's another person's story.
Yeah, different paths.
Okay. So you go outside yourself and you try to find, but there's always a pull back to wanting the approval of your parents.
I would consciously feel that I was beyond that stage, but
Parents take the place when we are young children of God. They are omnipotent, omnipresent. They give everything that we need, and they take away everything we want. Okay. So children imprint onto the types of authority that their parents represent. Doesn't mean they accept it, but they imprint it as authority. And then they explore other kinds of authority when they have the power to do so. So I don't want to get too far afield here. What I heard was you talked about the inner moral compass, and the word we and us came up a lot. And my challenge was, what if the compass is off? Who's going to find out? Who's going to help us all realign? And you may be one of those people because you sense something is wrong. The people who don't sense something is wrong cannot help. And just out of interest, that is the message in Patrick Lecture 180, The Spiritual Significance of Relationship. The person who has a sense that something is wrong is the only person who can search it out, because the other people are clueless.
I do sometimes wonder those people who who perhaps aren't consciously aware that there's something wrong. They may still be, not in all cases, but in some cases, models for the rest of us in how to be in alignment with their inner selves, maybe. And
some people align their lives faster than others. The truth is, though, you don't know that they're aligning correctly. All you know is that the effects seem positive. There is nothing more deadly than a positive effect resting upon a spiritual untruth.
Mm.
And the reality that Patrick presents is you don't know this person's spiritual story.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know what it looks like. And that's why we really can't diagnose other people.
Yeah.
We don't have the information. We have your story. We have your memory of that little sense of misalignment. And even when other people describe it, we don't have their experience, we just have their words. And words are a gross way to communicate.
Yeah.
So let's get back to your life. Where in your life does it feel like your back is being broken again?
That difficulty in finding a really effective life, where the particular sort of package of tools that I brought with me into this incarnation are put to constructive use.
Okay. That's okay. That's good enough. That's good. So you want to use your tools to constructive use. Okay. Spirituality is often a paradox on human thinking. Sometimes the spiritual lesson is the opposite. That perhaps, for instance, you don't need any tools. But because you've needed them in the past, you believe you do, and you're afraid to go naked.
I have a strong belief, I don't know, or understanding that we, each of us, select a package of tools with which to come into each incarnation in order to fulfill our tasks for that.
That is true, but what if your spiritual task is to use them for a period of time and then release them? Can you feel the courage it would take to put them down? It's not like you didn't use them, you've been using them. But what if, to go further, you need to put them down?
That would really leave me feeling very much at sea.
You see, we're not.
I wouldn't even know where to begin to look for solutions.
Well, what I'm challenging you is to get your thinking process. It's like fluffing up a doona. Okay, a lot of these feathers have settled down. They're compacted. You need a little fluffing. Okay, I do not pretend to know who you are spiritually.
Mm.
but I can smell stuck when I feel it.
Oh, yeah.
Metaphor. Okay?
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
stuckness here.
Yeah.
And that can come from using the same set of tools in the same way beyond their use-by date.
Mm. 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 I don't know if you've read uh, Barbara Brodsky's work with Aaron, but Aaron has this metaphor about a life jacket, that at one point in your incarnational stream you wore this life jacket and it was very useful and it kept you afloat and it was a useful thing, but we learn to hang on to this life jacket long after it becomes tattered and useless, but we still cling to this life jacket because we're just so afraid to let it go.
Right.
And he talks about, you know, letting this rotten life jacket go, that you don't need to hang on to it anymore. Mm.
There's a biblical phrase about going through the eye of a needle. It has to do with rich men and camels and so forth.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you imagine the new phase of your life being like slipping through the eye of a needle into a greater dimension,
Mm.
you can't take the life jacket with you.
Mm. Mm.
But if we believe that we need the life jacket, it's like the Chinese finger puzzle.
Mm. Mm.
Okay? The more we struggle, the more stuck we stay.
Mm. Mm.
But you can see why, in order to relax, if you don't believe that the universe is benign,
Mm.
then putting down your defenses is terrifying.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the work involves slowly inching forward bit by bit, building a sense of the benign and a sense of being able to trust God, spirit, heaven, whatever terms make you comfortable.
Mm. Mm.
To feel that you can put your head on that pillow at night and trust that they will show you in the morning what to do next.
Mm. Mm. This is a particular thing that I've been stuck on for a long time. This has been very difficult for me to move past on my own.
So say a little bit more about that. Why do you find it hard to move past?
I guess for my young adult life, my life path unfolded before me in a usually very obvious kind of fashion, and job offers would come up out of the blue, or relationships would come up out of the blue, and it was just particularly the right thing to happen for me at that time. And despite usual ups and downs, my life seemed to progress fairly in an obvious kind of fashion. But for the last perhaps 20 years, it's life has been very different, and it hasn't been obvious to me what path I should or shouldn't follow. I haven't had that kind of helpful feeling of direction, and I try to make sort of intellectual, logical choices, good choices, and they just seem to lead me up the garden path. And
So let me give you an example from my life. I married young. I stayed married for 23 years. It was not a good marriage, but I'm stubborn. And I was going to make it work. It took 23 years to make me let go. And what I was holding on to was I thought that the person I had married had the key to my spiritual path. I really did. I learned so much, and I was so expanded by the experience. It wasn't a good relationship, it was a good expansion.
Mm.
That I was convinced that if I just kept trying and tried as hard as I could, it would work.
Mm.
But in hindsight, what I see is the other part that I couldn't see at the time, where I didn't want to do things on my own.
Mm.
I wanted to be led instead of lead.
Mm.
And what I am trying to say is that 23 years was essential for my growth. If you take that away from me, I cannot be the person I am today.
Mm.
But finally saying enough led me to where I am today.
Mm.
Not overnight. Okay. This is what I'm talking about. Just because something worked or feels like it works for 20 years does not mean it's going to work for the next 20 years. And the more we try to hold on to the old success formula, the more we stay stuck and we cannot enter the next phase of our lives. And this is where the intellect gets in trouble, because it wants to create a plan. But this is about surrendering to the unknown.
Mm.
And to do that, you have to have faith.
Mm. I'm not so sure that I was following a formula so much in my young adult life when things progressed more smoothly. At least not that I can see. And I feel that, I feel that for the last 10 years at least, if not more, 15 years, I have felt that I have been trying to be open and surrender. At least on a conscious level, that's what I feel that I've been doing, and yet life keeps throwing all these curveballs at me.
What I'm suggesting to you is doing something that doesn't work for 10 or 15 years is what we're here to do.
Mm.
It's not a mistake. It's knowledge.
Mm.
You build knowledge of what doesn't work by beating your head against a wall until you're bloodied and damaged and there's no other solution. You say, well, I'll try something else. Good.
Mm.
But at least we know what doesn't work.
Mm.
And yet what I hear is there's still an attachment to figuring out how to be good.
Mm. Mm.
Instead of reinventing.
Perhaps good's not quite the right word. How to be effective, how to make proper use of this incarnation,
That's a value.
and learn the lessons that I'm here to learn.
Being effective is the result of something else. It's not the cause, it's a symptom, it's an effect. I'm playing a little bit with the word effective.
Yeah.
Okay? So in other words, to be effective is to move quickly and easily through situations.
Mm.
Okay? To do that, you have to be moving through the correct situations with the correct attitude. And as long as you're not in the right place doing the right thing for the right reasons, effective will remain beyond your grasp.
Yeah.
And that's what spiritual law tries, the study of spiritual law in particular, tries to say. As long as we are not in alignment with any single spiritual truth, it will hold us back.
Mm.
And we are all unique. We're all working on a different aspect
Yeah.
of a lie or a false belief or a misconception.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I hear is I hear you saying, but this, and I've been doing this, and it's been 10 or 15 years. Drop in the bucket spiritually.
Mm.
Spirit wants us to try to do something for 20 years. I love to joke because Spirit is looking at its proverbial watch, saying, when do you think she'll give up? I don't know. When do you think? I don't know. We're another 5 years. She'll give up. She'll give up. You know? Our girl is smart. She's going to get it. But you go take lunch. That's okay. I'll take this shift.
Mm.
Okay?
Yeah.
They don't care how long it takes. You're that important.
Mm.
Your task is that important.
Mm. And I guess the more times we go around the circle too, the better the knowledge is imprinted on our spiritual brains. That
what I hear
really doesn't work. That really, really doesn't work.
When I explain Pathwork Lecture 50, the Vicious Circle, okay, and I'm making some notes here. When I explain the Vicious Circle, my way of explaining it is we come in with a concept that is great, absolutely great. It's a wonderful concept. But we have to put it into practice. And in a vicious circle, we get it wrong. We interpret incorrectly what love would look like. And we try to make that work. And when it doesn't work, we try harder and harder. And then we get angry and we get frustrated. You can hear the vicious circle. It's like, oh my God. Okay? Until we're just exhausted and say, oh my, I can't do this anymore. This is impossible. And you come up for air and you try it again. But if that misconception is still, if that tweak is still there, you're still going to get it wrong.
Yeah. I think that lecture, the first time around when I read the Pathwork lectures, that was the one that really struck me hardest.
Okay.
That one.
So the trick is to go back up and find what that original intention was and look at the interpretation of what it should look like, what you want it to look like, what you imagine it to look like. Because it's in the interpretation, in the translation, is where we get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people beat themselves up. But it's not their original intention that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's how they decided it ought to look, feel, be, what it should give us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so America is infused with a Puritan ethic. And the Puritan ethic says if you're rich, you must be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
That's not spiritual. That's presuming a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, from a spiritual standpoint, a rich person could be learning how little money matters and how it doesn't give you what you want.
Mm-hmm.
After they have done immoral things to get the money.
Mm-hmm.
So they not only learn that money isn't everything, they are able to see what damage it does to only focus on money.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the spiritual lesson and the human lessons don't match up.
Mm-hmm.
There's a paradox in there.
Yeah. I've often read that whenever you come across a fundamental paradox in your life, that somewhere in there is a spiritual truth.
There you go.
Yeah. That if everything's logical and sequential, then that's not challenging you. Yeah.
So initially what you said was that you get these things intellectually, but you don't get them emotionally or experientially.
Yeah, it always bounces back against that deeper fear that the universe is not benign, that all is welcome.
My sense is that fear is coming from your mind because it doesn't want to cede control.
There is a fear there, and I can't remember if I read this in Pathwork or elsewhere, but there is a fear in there that if I let go of all control, that the universe will throw even harder things at me than what I've already had to deal with.
Again,
in order to test me and challenge me.
Okay. You see, you're seeing tests and challenge as negative.
Yeah.
Instead of understanding that they are developing you.
Mm. Well, so often as humans, those tests and challenges are very painful, and it's only in hindsight that we see how they've strengthened us.
But we do see it in hindsight.
Mm.
What I'm talking about is instead of waiting 10 years to see that your life is valuable just as it is, do it today.
Mm.
And my invitation to you is to look at your life today and create a story that makes it perfect. This is something that I do all the time. It's a very useful exercise to take your judgment about a specific situation, turn it upside down, and create a story that tells it from a different perspective and makes it not only right, but the best possible circumstance for you to be in.
Mm.
I did that one time when my life was literally threatened and was at peace.
Mm.
I'm here, so they didn't need to kill me.
Mm.
But apparently I needed a death threat to realize that I still doubted.
Mm.
And once I relaxed and said, whatever, I'll do the best I can under the circumstances. I will be moral, I will be good, I will breathe, I will be here. The threat dissipated. I believe these are tests that we are given to show us where we're lacking faith.
Yeah. I will just throw this in a bit of an aside, but I just think it would be good for you to be aware of it. When I was a very small child, an infant and toddler, up until the time I was about early adolescence, I had spontaneous out-of-body experiences, which as a small child I thought were normal. I just thought everyone did this. And it was only as I got older that I realised, when my friends had no idea what I was talking about, that that this was not a common experience. But I think from infancy, I've been aware that death is a glorious thing, that it's a very desirable realm to be in.
Well,
So whatever fears I have, whatever deep negative fears I have, it is never ever about death.
Yes, but there's a discrepancy here. You are identifying physical death as acceptable, but not social death.
Yeah, I guess. What I was going to say is that having that knowledge and that very deep understanding, which is heartfelt, it's not intellectual, it's a heartfelt knowing. It throws into relief this physical incarnation and makes that purpose of physical incarnation that much more of an imperative for me. There are lessons to be gained from being in physical incarnation, which you just cannot escape, or
But I'm still hearing a discrepancy. It's as if there's, numbers help. It's as if there's 5 kinds of death. This one you're perfectly comfortable with. These bother you. There's a discrepancy there.
Well, the other things are all kind of physical manifestations. They're not deeper truths. They're not deeper awarenesses. They're all part of that physical illusion.
But you say that you're not afraid to die.
No.
Then why are you afraid to be challenged?
This is a puzzle for me. don't. This is where that intellectual
Right.
thing sort of interferes.
What I'm saying
because
is
I don't understand it.
there's a discrepancy here.
Mm.
Your mind justifies some kinds of death, but you have a soul experience of death that's at conflict with that mind. What I am saying is the mind does not wish to die in any form whatsoever. And social, intellectual, emotional, all these deaths are perceived by the mind as the same as physical death.
Or worse than.
Pardon?
Or worse than.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So this is the study in the pathwork of images. Your mind has an image of what you should look like, what good looks like, what a well-lived life looks like. And that image is superimposed, and your mind is not willing to listen to spirit. You are, and this one place, you have succeeded. Now your task is to succeed in the other areas. And teach your mind to have faith.
Yeah. Well, this touches on one of the reasons why I was looking for this sort of discussion, is because this is again where that intellect or the mind, the images conflict with what I know deeper is spiritual truth, and yet being consciously aware of this conflict, I have a lot of difficulty in giving up or sort of getting within this conflict and understanding it, and therefore dissolving it.
So part of what we teach is to try to divide our consciousness into different parts so that we can see more clearly where the distortion is. In Pathwork Lecture 182, the 3-chair meditation, we look at higher self, we look at adult ego, and we look at child consciousness. But sometimes the adult ego is the problem. Okay. In effect, we're being asked to, it's like a clown having to pick both feet off the ground for a moment. Okay. It can be done spiritually, but it cannot be done in human form. And that's what it feels like to the mind. The mind says, impossible, can't do it. Can be done. So I'm feeling more and more that there's a place where the ego and the mind have clamped on to the right way. And they're not going to give in to anything. To identify a distortion is 90% of the battle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is where it's difficult to work on your own, because finding that distortion.
The fact that you are alone was part of your life plan, period. It is to your benefit. I don't know how or why. Okay. And I certainly don't want to pick on your words, and it's not an attempt to criticize. Every time we say, this is hard, we're actually shoring up our opposition to the challenge. The mind is rationalizing. The mind is intellectualizing. Why, I can't do it that way, I'll go do something else. Well, if the task is here, going and doing something else isn't going to accomplish the task that needs to be done. So I used to use the example in groups, because I'm short and somewhat portly. And I have this feeling in my body of wanting to be a ballet dancer. Okay? Where it comes from, I don't know, but I can feel it. But not in this body, not in this lifetime. And where I go with that is that would have distracted me from what I'm supposed to do this time. It's not that I don't deserve it. As a matter of fact, that could be a remnant of already having had it. But once you've had a glorious experience, why would you repeat it? There's more work to do. I used to tease the group in Australia when they would praise me sometimes. My feeling was I had finally resolved enough issues where I could lead, but in previous lifetimes I wasn't leading because I wasn't good enough. So I have a sense of great joy about this time I get to lead, yay! And I don't want to blow it. Okay? Imagine what it would feel like in the next lifetime if I once again took a subservient position and was not able to lead. Imagine there would be a feeling in me that this isn't right, it's not fair, I deserve it. This is the spiritual complexity that we are working with. And if we allow ourselves to protest, we're not going to receive the gift that we have created, which is an opportunity to learn something that can only be learned where we are, with the tools at hand, with the circumstances that are occurring around us. And whenever we digress, that's okay, we're human, digress for a while. But except for relaxing the tension and giving us a break, it can become a distraction. So what I was attempting to respond to was why the intellectual experience can be so powerful. The mind is a very large portion of who we are. The invitation here is for the mind to grow up and realize there's more to life than its view. And my experience, again, is that once we do that and we open, then there's a lot of experiences that were possible. But the mind was literally editing them out. Because to accept it would have basically lowered its leadership role in its imagination. But what is the best kind of leader? The one that thinks solely of the long term, the highest good of all, not themselves. So my invitation to you is to consider that from within the human form as you are, you need to retrain your mind.
Because I've been a scientist and from childhood was quite obsessed with being a scientist. It was the only thing I ever wanted to be. In this last decade or so of difficulty, I've become aware of, and I presume this is one of my life tasks, how the mind has really been in a position of supremacy in all of my development. And it is, or at least the way that it's configured at the moment, it is an obstacle to my further development, and that somehow I need to learn to not put the mind aside necessarily, but to use it in the correct fashion, that it is not an obstacle to spiritual development.
And the first thing you'll need to do to start that process is not accept the mind's judgment, evaluation, or self-analysis as fact. And to do that, you need to find out what
so much more easily said than done, but so much more easily said than done. But
yes, it is. But you see, you haven't really addressed the other parts of you, as if, and that's what I mean, is sometimes splintering ourselves into different parts is very effective. Okay? Voice dialogue can be self-taught. You can learn to hear the voices of different aspects of your personality.
Mm.
You
I
need
had a therapist a couple of years ago who used the acronym is IFS, and I think it's something like Internal Family Systems or something like that. And it actually does specifically that. It helps you to get within your psyche and recognize it's almost like multiple personalities within your mind, which we all have to a degree, and sort of splinters off these different characters and in a semi-meditative kind of a state. So it really is your subconscious coming up to the surface. And I found it completely fascinating, these characters that appeared. And they're all aspects of me.
What you may need to do is sit down and speak and record it.
Mm.
And then play it back and listen, because it's hard in the moment to hear the differentiation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you hear it recorded back to you, you're in the position of an objective observer. You're not in the moment anymore. You're not overwhelmed by a thought as those words come out. You're hearing the thoughts, and you can say, oh, now, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. You can hear from a different place. So recording yourself is a tool that you have access to. Okay? Just hearing your own voice helps. And inviting these other parts of you to speak and listening to the mind trying to shut them down. You can hear that. Okay? You can develop an inner ear for the mind trying to take over. And once you have an awareness of that energy, you can notice how many times a day it happens and reduce the number of occasions. This is not about getting rid of the mind. This is about harnessing the mind so that it serves us. And for most of us, the mind is a master.
Our society trains us to do this since the age of enlightenment, and in science in particular. And I presume that's why I presume that's why I was led to science, in order to quite specifically to show the limitations of mind.
So blessings upon society for being in this phase, because we must need it, because we're both born at this time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that's the attitude you have to cultivate. Of all the eons I could have picked for this task, this is a great one. Because nobody's supporting me in this. I have to do this on my own. I have to do it because I think it's right, not because anybody will approve of me. And by developing the part of you that's willing to go against the tide, go against opinion, go against what seems like the road to love and acceptance, we are strengthening other parts of us as we find the truth about ourselves. So does that feel complete at the moment? For the moment?
Yes, yes. The mind immediately steps in and says, yes, but. How do I then progress?
No.
I mean, the whole impetus for this now is this almost 18 months coming up of limbo, where I gave up my past life as a scientist and moved into state, and sort of consciously at least tried to open myself to what else the universe might have to offer me, because I'm here, I'm seeking spiritually, I'm open to new experiences. I've decided to shuck off this rotten old life jacket, and here I am, universe. And 18 months later, we're still stuck, we're still struggling materially.
Doing this exercise does not mean you can't continue to do all the other things you do. Thinking dualistically. You're thinking, I have to do this instead of that. No, do them both. You can multitask. You can.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
So I'm going to invite you not to think in terms of either or. This process could be the key to moving you out of your current difficulty. So the noticing may need to happen while you have some deep existential fears about your future. The combination of the fear may be a gift that will help you see more clearly how you don't open your eyes to possibilities.
Mm. Mm. The fear is such a complex kind of blanket with many threads, many yarns in it, and I think trying to expose this or uncover this internal dialogue within that fear thing that the mind keeps throwing up would be a most important exercise for me at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So I was smiling because, of course, the task is complex, and that's a compliment to who you are.
Mm.
We are not given kindergarten exercises.
Yeah. Mm. Mm-hmm.
When you are at the edge of your capacity to grow, the lessons are going to be complex and deep and meaningful.
Mm. My mind still wants, and this is part of that spiritual community thing, being supported, not having that kind of support in this life.
So another thing that you can do, Anita, is you can develop your own ability to access spiritual community. It is there for you. Not technically, but spiritually.
Mm.
And you don't do that. And I say you don't do it because of what you just said.
Mm.
At any given moment, you can close your eyes and connect with any person on the planet on a spiritual level.
Yeah. Mm.
They'd be glad to chat with you.
Mm.
You can speak to your team. You can speak to whoever is involved in what you do.
Mm.
This is the power of prayer. If it's honest,
Mm.
the desire for communion.
Mm. Mm.
And if you develop that, then the hunger for physical communion may lower to the point where you're not as concerned about it. And then the funny thing is, the paradox is then it appears sometimes.
Yeah.
It's our very hunger for it that's a demand that somehow chases it away. Like we have a positive airflow.
Mm.
So I hear your, I'm going to call it complaint, and I'm telling you you've got the power to do something about it.
Mm.
Unless you have a design and it doesn't fit your design, and that's where the mind can get you in trouble.
Mm.
It says basically, not good enough for me.
Yes. The mind still wants answers. It still expects, support, material support. It expects answers. It expects directions. Do this and you'll be okay. Yeah.
So
And that's very.
can you see where that's slightly immature? The mind sounds
Oh,
like so big
can,
and important.
I can see where it's very mature.
Okay.
And I can see how it can very easily be, whether it is or not, a remnant from past incarnations, that I'm still expecting, that kind of support and guidance in this life, overt support and guidance, rather than hearing it from within myself.
Then the I that is speaking, that can hear the mind, that needs to take charge.
Yes. Yeah.
I hear it very clearly. You hear your mind. You have already been able to do this. To hear that voice as not subsuming all you are, not being who you are. That's the mind. The person who is speaking is basically defending the mind and saying, yes, it is immature. Well, then that voice has the power to reparent the mind. And that is to some extent what we have to do as adults. We have to reparent the parts of us that are immature, that aren't functioning well.
Yes.
It's unfortunate that there are parts of us that aren't functioning well, but that is the reality. And
several of those characters that came up in those therapy sessions were actually children, adolescents. Yeah. Yeah. And I know I do have the ability to recognize these voices and see them for what they are. Yeah.
You do. And you've just done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not as hard as you think. Nice job.
The times when I've become aware of these sorts of things are times when I've been able to actually reflect off, a therapist or a counsellor or somebody. And it is still difficult for me to do on my own. But if I get more into the habit of, writing, changing the stories, actually writing out kind of the story of each day or each fear as it comes up, perhaps I can reflect that to myself. Yeah.
Cool.
I'll try that.
All right. So thank you very much for the work that you do. Thank you for even considering letting me use this recording. And of course, you'll review it and tell me how comfortable you are. And we shan't use anything that you're not comfortable with. But thank you for trying.
Well, thank you for being there too.
No worries.
What can I say?
All right. I'm going to turn that off now.